Colorado's counties prepare to take back control over pandemic restrictions. They'll look back with us on what they've learned from the last year. An inmate in Colorado has a question about who's getting shots on the inside and what happens when corrections officers refuse the vaccine. The answer is they get offered money. Remembering a man who took an oath to our community and lived up to it until his final moment. A return to Red Rocks, minus the biggest names. And you want to watch some people hug? Like, not in a creepy way, like in the most beautiful way. That's next. Colorado is close to turning a corner in the pandemic, which means the state's talking about turning more control back to individual counties. A year ago, local health departments were all over the place, and they may be again, but at least it'll be with the benefit of a year's experience to guide their decisions. Our Steve Steger talked with two in two very different parts of our state.
It's critical to continue to balance the social and economical impacts of the restrictions. However, we need to react swiftly.
In Larimer County, cases are starting to trend up. So the public health director there, Tom Gonzalez, worries it might be a little too early for the state to ease off the gas.
We believe face coverings, masks should be the last to go. And honestly, we would like to see a statewide order there.
He may not win that argument, but whenever individual counties and health departments do get more control, Gonzalez says he's learned it's pretty crucial to think regionally.
And we learned that early on, back in March and April, when we all kind of were doing something different. Probably in May, we all got together and said, what are you doing? How can we be consistent among regions and among county boundaries?
Larimer, Boulder, and Weld counties continue that work together, hopeful they can figure out restrictions that work well for their region.
What makes it difficult, we're all doing something different. And so we're trying to work as a region on protective measures.
Being on the western slope, we've never been in favor of a one-size-fits-all solution.
In Mesa County, the prospect for more individual control is welcome. Jeff Coor, the public health director there, says he's learned the best way to deal with restrictions is to compromise with the people you're restricting.
Make it win-win across the board. Don't come in there and say, sorry, folks, we're shutting it down. And if that's not along with the best wishes of your county commissioners or your city council, you got to do what's right.
Mesa County came up with the 5-star program to allow restaurants and other businesses to stay open during the toughest restrictions. Coor says his job is to constantly balance between his community's physical and fiscal health.
Sometimes you have to give up what you feel strongly about in order to achieve that win-win, because it's going to get you a lot more mileage down the road.
So Coor says he's found it's much easier to work with someone to make something happen than to just take the whole Dikembe Mutombo approach and be like, no, no, no. He says a great example, Country Jam, the music festival in Mesa County. He says that in that case, the organizers and the health department worked together from the very beginning. They're going to make it happen. It's going to happen in June, and they now can sell it as one of the safer events because they worked with the health department right from the beginning.
Yeah, I think just less public arguing and more public collaboration would be useful for the public psyche this time around.
Yeah, he says the one thing that they learned with the 5-star program is it's a lot easier to point out people who are doing things right. They might take an approach like that with a mask mandate. They might point out businesses that decide to keep masks as part of their protocols and give them a little bit more positive reinforcement.
A little less talk and a lot more action, in the words of Country Jam headliner Toby Keith. All right, Steve, thank you. Hospitalizations are just stubbornly stuck. 329 patients currently in Colorado's hospitals with COVID-19, up 5 patients from the day before, up a dozen patients from this time last week. We had a nearly 7% positivity rate in Colorado yesterday. Not great. We've seen relatively high single-day averages so far this work week. We're watching that 7-day average, which is currently at an acceptable 4.1%. 17% of Coloradans have completed their vaccine regimen, and 11% are halfway there. And look at that. We've got the 20% of the state population too young to be vaccinated at any point grayed out on the pie chart, as a number of you have requested. The letter came to us from the inside, from an inmate in Colorado's Department of Corrections questioning their safety with so many prison employees refusing to get the vaccine. It's enough of an issue that we've learned that the DOC is offering its workers $500 to get the shot. Here's Marshall Zellinger.
There are 6,211 employees who work for the Colorado Department of Corrections. 40% are fully vaccinated. 4% have received one dose. That means the majority of corrections staff is not yet vaccinated, and why the executive director is waving a really shiny carrot on a stick.
I don't think it's offensive to say, look, it's such a public safety concern that we're going to provide an incentive for you to get the vaccine.
A $500 incentive, subject to normal taxes and withholdings, is being offered to any corrections staff who gets vaccinated by May 15th. Based on the 40% who are fully vaccinated, that's $1.2 million. If everyone gets it, $3 million in bonuses.
This investment of having our staff vaccinated, providing an incentive for that, is very small compared to the cost that we've incurred over dealing with a pandemic.
Giving them $500 to get a shot, incentivizing vaccinations, if that's what it comes to, we need to do what we need to do to get out of this pandemic.
Hillary Glasgow is the executive director of Colorado WINS, the union for state employees, including prison workers. If they receive the vaccination at work, the DOC already knows. If they got it elsewhere, they have to tell their employer, if they want the money.
You definitely shouldn't lose privacy rights. And I think that's why the state has not made it mandatory to report your status or to require the vaccine at all.
There are nearly 40,000 state employees, many of whom have had to work throughout the pandemic to, run the state. But not every state employee is being offered money to get vaccinated.
I would respectfully hope my fellow state employees would understand is that we're asking our staff to go work in densely populated environments.
There is a special link for employees to fill out if they're not getting vaccinated for either religious reasons or medical reasons. In those cases, those employees can still get the incentive. Prisoners are not getting the same incentive. So far, a little more than 5,400 have received at least one shot. That's about 40% of the current population, Kyle, but that could also include inmates who are former inmates who have either been paroled or served their sentence.
And Marshall, the piece of jail mail that got us started on this suggested that inmates who refused the shot were subject to some kind of restriction. Did we learn anything about that?
Well, there's different cases because there's the Buena Vista prison that had the variants and got a lot of the prisoners, I think 85% were vaccinated, and then they're able to open up more. There are other prisons that won't have prisoners vaccinated until Friday or and after, just like the general population. But I was told by the director that he's going to have to look at this. He's not worrying about it yet, but how to treat an employee who refuses to get vaccinated and what they may have to do, maybe continue wearing a mask where others wouldn't have to wear a mask, versus a prisoner who chooses not to get vaccinated. Maybe they will still be limited to where they can go or having to wear a mask when others might not have to wear a mask.
A lot of workplaces dealing with the details of this. Prison's obviously very different kind of workplace. Marshall, thank you. Boulder police officer Eric Talley leaves a large, loving family and a grateful community. Grateful for the fact that he ran into that grocery store knowing that he was the first officer there and the shooter was still inside. He lived his oath to protect and serve his community until his final moment. The procession to his funeral today was miles long. Hundreds of law enforcement vehicles headed for that church in Lafayette, where people gathered to remember the man who was a devoted Catholic, a caring husband and father, and just a funny guy. The speakers took time today to talk directly to Talley's 7 children.
To the kids, all 7 of you, hold your heads high. I see your dad's compassion and kindness in each of you. Be proud of your father. He is a hero. Your father is a real-life example of the good in this world, and it shows in your smile and your laughter.
Your father died a hero. There is no doubt. Because of his bravery and quick action, dozens of innocent lives were saved. I hope this brings solace to you all in the years ahead.
Officer Talley's children wrote him a poem for Christmas in 2019. It was titled Our Unsung Hero. It was printed in his funeral program. One of Colorado's top Democratic lawmakers represents that part of Boulder where the grocery store shooting happened. Senate Majority Leader Steve Fenberg told us that he's considering a number of bills that would enhance background checks for firearms, improve mental health funding, or allow cities like Boulder to get tougher on guns on their own. Fenberg told us he'd even support a statewide ban on assault weapons, but he wasn't sure if a state ban would accomplish that much.
I support an assault weapons ban. I think in the end, for that to truly be effective, though, it really does need to happen at the federal level. Someone who's really intent on doing something horrible can drive to Wyoming pretty easily. Does that mean it's off the table and we shouldn't consider it? Of course not. Again, if there was an assault weapons ban bill on the Senate floor, I would vote for it.
Democrats, of course, control the entire state legislature. So while Fenberg says that he is talking with his Republican colleagues about possible compromises, if Democrats choose to vote together on any of these bills, then those bills would pass. The accusation coming from inside the state health department is damning. That bosses there knowingly ordered employees to break the law and allow more air pollution than Colorado should have. They have now gone to federal investigators with this whistleblower's claim. In a complaint filed to the EPA's Office of Inspector General and obtained by our Marshall Zellinger, these employees accused the state health department, CDPHE, of suppressing pollution modeling that would otherwise shut down permits for businesses, accused them of approving air quality permits that would violate national standards, and sometimes ordering the modeling staff to ignore violations altogether. They even alleged that one modeler was ordered to falsify data, so no violations would be reported against a gold mine in Teller County. These insiders say this has been the state health department's way of doing business on air pollution for more than a decade, as our state's air quality has gotten worse. The state told us today it is looking at these claims brought by the three employees, but the state insists that its air pollution modeling policies follow the law.
Police would come to our house to warn us that they wanted to bomb our house.
Bomb their house. For what? For believing that every Coloradan should have the chance to own a home. Decades later, that family's still in the business of making home ownership happen. Red Rocks will soon come alive with music. Your question led us to a big announcement today and a change in the type of acts we'll see there, at least for a while. That's next. Tonight's next question comes from Debbie. Like many Coloradans, Debbie has tickets to a Red Rock show that never happened because of the pandemic. So Debbie asked for an update on the capacity limits out there and any kind of a schedule.
Debbie, Red Rocks got back to us today with news that some smaller shows are going to start again soon. So they're at a 2,500 person limit for now, which they hope they can increase over the summer, depending on what happens with COVID. Normal capacity at Red Rocks is 9,500. There are going to be rules on mask wearing and social distancing. There will be different entrance and exit procedures. As to who is playing, shows are set to resume third week in April. You're only going to see the acts that are willing to play for what they can make off of a crowd of 2,500. So the folks in charge out there apparently furiously rebooking some of the more popular acts now for next year. There are going to be new artists and groups willing to play for smaller crowds that'll come in and take their slots. So keep listening for a formal announcement of a Red Rock schedule.
From sunshine to snow and back to sunshine again. We're wrapping up the coldest day of the week with temperatures this afternoon in the 30s and 40s. The storm that brought 1 to 4 inches of snow is shifting east. We're seeing drier air work in from north to south with clearing skies, good radiational cooling and all that snow cover. One of the colder nights this week expected with forecast lows in the teens along the Front Range. A nice warm up though starts tomorrow after a really cold night. Our low at 19 under partly cloudy skies, but then we see those numbers jump tomorrow. Low 50s, mid 60s on Thursday. Beautiful forecast for opening day for our Rockies. That home opener looks terrific and almost 80 by Easter Sunday.
Frozen out of opportunity in Denver, they created their own.
So we just started the business.
A family story of perseverance despite prejudice. Still going strong decades later. Next.
Home ownership. Access to home ownership has been a defining aspect of success and inequity in America. There's a family that's had an up-close view of how that has played out in Denver since the 1950s, and they shared their story, 7 decades worth, with our Byron Reed.
Part of what makes a house a home is the family living inside.
It was 6 kids. So Dad had to support us.
Shelley Hodge grew up with her family in Denver and started working for her parents when she was just 13 years old.
I was the little, go-to person and had to help out.
Her parents started Town & Country Realty in the early 1950s to support their kids. Hodge now runs the family business and says it's one of the oldest black-owned real estate brokerage firms in Colorado. She says her family battled racism when her father first started the company.
Police would come to our house to warn us that they wanted to bomb our house.
Denver was very prejudiced at that time.
Mary Johnson is Shelley's mother and says they started the business because it was hard for her husband to get a job.
Although he had the qualifications, they really weren't looking for a black person.
It's extremely important to stay in tune with what's going on.
Muriel Williams-Thompson.
I am also a broker for Town & Country Realty.
Is Shelley's daughter.
My mother is my boss.
And is the president of Denver's chapter of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, a black real estate group with the goal of equal housing for all. She says her grandparents' company and families of color also face the challenges of redlining.
And a bank actually literally took a red pen and drew a line around the areas where they would not service loans. Those areas here in Colorado and across the nation were the predominantly minority areas, were black and Latino.
They didn't really want you, going anywhere else, which at that time was fine with us because it was close to the airport and a lot of blacks worked there.
Hodge says she hopes to continue the family tradition.
Our goal is to get as many of people of color that we can into homes.
Of making the dream of home ownership a reality for all their customers.
It's my mom and dad's legend.
For Next,
it's a business that can never be sold.
I'm Byron Reed.
Business can never be sold. We want to show you a hug. It was 13 months in the making. We're going to carve out some time for pure joy around here. And your feedback, which is often the opposite. Next.
Love you, girl. Oh, honey.
Watch a hug montage all day. Nothing but just families falling into each other's arms after the separation of the pandemic, now solved part due to science. This is the moment on Sunday that Alice and Dick got to hug their granddaughter for the first time in 13 months. Dick has some health issues, so they were real careful to protect him until he was vaccinated. And just look at that. I mean, man, sweet moment on Sunday with their granddaughter, Bladen. Deb writes in tonight, identifies herself as a state employee, takes issue with the Department of Corrections offering incentives for prison employees to get the vaccine, says when other state employees are taking furloughs due to budget restrictions, Deb writes, this does not look good. It's certainly a tricky issue. There's a health case for it, but understand the budget considerations and how it looks to other state employees as well. Becca writes in to say, thank you for adding the under 16 population to the vaccination pie chart. Becca, from your ears, from your lips to our graphic designer's ears. And Kathy says, don't take this wrong way. Your attire has been humdrum lately. We could use some brightness. Do your part. Maybe return to the fireplace?